Imagine for a second that you have just done the impossible. You are a 22-year-old kid who stepped into the ring against the scariest man on the planet, Sonny Liston, a monster who breaks jaws with a single glance. And you didn't just survive, you made him quit. It is 9:00 a.m., February 26, 1964. Miami Beach is bathed in blinding sunshine, and by all laws of logic, you should be bathing in champagne, signing multi-million-dollar contracts, and enjoying your status as America's new sweetheart. You are the king of the world, the golden boy, the embodiment of the American dream. But instead of triumph, the air in your hotel room hangs heavy with tension, thick and suffocating like gunpowder smoke, because you know something that no one in the roaring crowd outside knows yet. Your career, your fame, and quite possibly your life are going to end in exactly 1 hour. Cassius Clay, the new heavyweight champion of the world, is preparing to face the press, not to accept congratulations, but to commit the loudest and most dangerous career suicide in the history of sports. You think you know this story? You think it's just a name change? You are deeply mistaken. In the realities of 1964, what he was about to do was equivalent to the biggest Super Bowl star walking onto a podium today and pledging allegiance to ISIS on live TV. America at that time was a powder keg where racial segregation was the law, and any deviation from the norm was punished brutally and instantly. Standing in the center of this hurricane was Cassius, the white establishment's perfect project. He was handsome, he was talkative, he was safe. But on that morning, he was about to destroy that image with one short sentence that would make millions of people, who just yesterday bet on his victory, wish for his death. Why did he decide to pull the trigger right now, at the peak of absolute greatness, when the whole world lay at his feet? To understand this insane, irrational step, we need to rewind the tape 4 years and look at one specific object that hung around his neck 24 hours a day. The Olympic gold medal from Rome, 1960. Remember this piece of metal, this dagger, because it is the key to the cipher of his hatred. Young Cassius Clay was obsessed with this medal. He slept with it, fearing it would be stolen. He wore it under his shirt. He even wore it in the shower, sincerely believing that this golden disc served as a magic shield that made him equal to any white man in America. He believed the lie he had been sold. Become a champion, bring glory to the country, and the country will love you. But one day that illusion shattered with such a crash that the shards remained stuck in his heart forever. Legend has it, and this is the detail that turns everything upside down, that upon returning to his native Louisville as a hero, with the medal shining on his chest, he walked into an ordinary diner to order a hamburger and a vanilla shake. He thought the gold on his neck was a pass into the world of respect, but the waitress didn't even look at the medal. She looked at the color of his skin and uttered the phrase that killed Cassius Clay long before he changed his name officially. "We don't serve Negroes." In that second, he realized the terrible truth. To them, he was not an Olympic hero, not the pride of the nation, not a champion. He was just a fight whose only job was to entertain the crowd as long as they allowed him to do so. It was this medal, meant to be a symbol of triumph, that turned into a slave collar only made of gold. And on that morning in Miami, looking at his reflection in the mirror, he saw not the conqueror of Liston, but a man who no longer wished to wear that collar. But the most frightening part wasn't that he had become disillusioned with the system, but rather who he chose as his new allies. Standing near him in the shadows of the hotel room was a man the FBI called the most dangerous man in America, Malcolm X. The connection to him was toxic, deadly. It guaranteed that sponsors would tear up contracts, boxing commissions would strip licenses, and envelopes containing bullets would start arriving in the mail. Ask yourself honestly, could you, holding a check for millions of dollars and the keys to the world in your hands, throw it all in the trash for a principle? Most of us would choose comfort, would choose silence, would choose the role of the good guy. But Cassius Clay, on the morning of February 26th, made a decision that no PR agent could comprehend. He decided that Cassius Clay had to die so that someone else could be born, someone whose name would become a curse for one half of America and a prayer for the other. And when he stepped out the door of that room, into the blinding flashes of the cameras, he knew there was no turning back, but he didn't even suspect the price he would have to pay for the 5 words already resting on the tip of his tongue. Let's stop time for a moment and go back to understand how flawless the trap was that Cassius Clay had fallen into, and why his attempt to escape it looked like an act of pure madness. America in the early 60s adored him, but this love was toxic, conditional, and hypocritical. To the white establishment, Cassius was the ideal project, a safe rebel whose rhymes and antics were perceived as cute entertainment, like the dance of a trained bear that would never bite its master. He was handsome as a Greek god. He didn't drink, didn't smoke, and always smiled for the cameras, creating the illusion that the racial problem in sports was solved. But no one noticed that behind that dazzling smile lay not joy, but a cold, calculated rage that had been accumulating for years. You think you know what pressure is? Try to imagine what it's like to be a symbol of hope for a nation that denies you the right to sit in the front seat of a bus, while every day receiving letters from your father begging you not to get involved with those fanatics because they will destroy everything you've achieved. But here, an element enters the game that turns this sports drama into a political thriller. This wasn't just a change of religion, as if he had switched from Baptist to Catholic. It was joining the Nation of Islam, an organization that in 1964, the FBI and CIA classified not as a church, but as a paramilitary sect and a major threat to national security. You have to feel this context. At a time when Martin Luther King was preaching nonviolence and integration, the Nation of Islam spoke of separatism, that the white man is a devil created by a mad scientist, and that black people should not ask for equality, but take it by force. To join their ranks as an Olympic champion was tantamount to publicly confessing to treason. And this was the step Cassius was preparing to take, fully aware that the shadow of Malcolm X, a man white America feared more than nuclear war, was already standing behind him. You probably think Cassius was just a naive guy who was groomed and brainwashed by cunning recruiters taking advantage of his youth and inexperience. That is exactly what the newspapers wrote. That is what his sponsors believed as they panicked and began tearing up contracts even before the official statement. But the truth is that here, the plot twist effect kicks in, flipping everything on its head. Cassius Clay was not a victim of manipulation. He was the only person in the room who saw the situation crystal clear. He used the Nation of Islam just as they used him. He needed a force capable of protecting him from a system that wanted to turn him into an obedient puppet, and he found that force in the most radical ideology of the time. But the most terrible things were happening not in the newspapers, but within his own family, where a tragedy of Shakespearean scale was playing out. His father, Cassius Clay Sr., screamed on every corner that the black Muslims had stolen his son, that they threatened to kill him if he left the sect. These public hysterics from his own father hit the boxer harder than any uppercut from Sonny Liston. Imagine this level of loneliness. The state is against you, the press is against you, the sponsors are against you, and even your own flesh and blood calls you a traitor and a madman. Envelopes without a return address appeared in his mailbox daily, containing not fan letters, but rifle bullets and notes with a single word: die. Ask yourself honestly, could you withstand this pressure, knowing that the only thing you need to do to save your life and career is simply to stay silent, simply remain good Cassius for a couple more years? Most people would have broken, chosen the safe path. But Clay looked at that gold medal he once wore as a talisman and saw in it not a prize, but a chain. He realized that gold is worthless if the name engraved on it belongs to a slave. He realized that the name Cassius Clay was the legacy of the white slave owner who owned his ancestors, and to wear it any longer would mean betraying the very essence of his struggle. So, he decided that Cassius must die to make room for someone the world was not yet ready to accept. And when he walked down the hotel corridor toward the conference hall, he wasn't just walking to meet journalists. He was walking to the execution of his past life, clutching an invisible detonator in his fist that was about to blow up the foundation of American sports. Have you ever heard the sound of an entire empire collapsing? Usually, we imagine the roar of cannons or bomb explosions, but on the morning of February 27, 1964, in a crowded conference room in Miami, that sound was different. It was the sound of hundreds of cheap folding chairs creaking under the weight of nervous journalists who had come not just to conduct an interview, but to witness a public execution. The air in the room was so thick with cigarette smoke and male sweat that it felt like you could cut it with a knife. In this gray haze, 250 reporters, the elite of sports journalism, white men in crumpled suits and hats, waited for their victim like a pack of sharks smelling a drop of blood in the water. They were sure they knew the script of this morning by heart. A young, arrogant kid who accidentally beat Liston would now step up to the mic, apologize for his connections with black fanatics, renounce his crazy ideas, and obediently return to the stable to once again become their favorite clown. You probably think they hated him. No, it was much more complex and cynical. They considered him their property, an investment that suddenly started behaving unpredictably, and their only goal was to fix the broken toy before it damaged itself. But when the doors swung open and the new world champion entered the hall, something went wrong, and this something made even the most experienced sharks of the pen freeze with their mouths open. Cassius Clay didn't look like a man coming to ask for forgiveness. He didn't look scared. He didn't look confused. And worst of all, his face didn't wear that trademark wide smile they so love to sell on magazine covers. Instead, before them stood a man with eyes cold and hard as two pieces of anthracite. And in that gaze lay such a terrifying clarity that a chill ran down the spines of many in the room. They expected to see a confused child, but saw someone who knew a secret capable of destroying their world. Why was he so calm? Why weren't his usual noisy cornermen beside him, but instead men with stone faces, unmistakably the security of the Nation of Islam? Questions hung in the air, but no one dared to ask the main one until one of the veteran journalists, sensing control of the situation slipping away, shouted from his seat, "So, are you a card-carrying member of those black Muslims or not?" This question was meant to be a trap, a snare with no exit, because a yes meant the end of his career, and a no would mean cowardice. But this is where the very principle that knocks the ground from under your feet kicked in. Clay didn't make excuses. He didn't dodge. He simply walked to the microphone, and at that moment, that visual silence we spoke of descended, an absolute vacuum-like void where the sounds of camera shutters vanished, whispers vanished, even the hum of the ventilation vanished, and it seemed that time stopped, freezing 250 people in a single point of history. Everyone waited for a scream, waited for the trademark, "I am the greatest." Hysterics. But he spoke quietly, almost in a whisper, and because of that his words sounded louder than the trumpets of Jericho. "I believe in Allah and in peace," he began, and every word fell into the silence of the hall like a heavy stone into a deep well. The journalists glanced at each other. Is that it? Did he just change churches? But then he delivered a blow no one was ready for, a blow aimed not at an opponent's jaw, but at the very heart of American identity. "I don't have to be who you want me to be," he said, looking straight into the TV camera lenses, and in that second, millions of viewers at their screens felt the established order of things crumble. "I am free to be who I want." You think the shock peaked there? You are mistaken, because that was merely the prelude to the real explosion, to the moment the plot flipped completely. Someone from the audience, trying to steer the conversation back to a familiar track, called him Cassius, and that name, which just yesterday sounded like music, suddenly sounded like an insult, like a spit in the face. The champion fell silent, his face turned to stone, and he uttered a phrase that divided sports history into before and after, a phrase more dangerous than any left hook. Cassius Clay is a slave name, he enunciated, and journalists stopped writing because their pens froze over their notepads from the realization of the monstrous meaning of what was said. I didn't choose it, and I don't want it. I am Muhammad Ali, and you will call me that. Do you understand what happened in that second? He didn't just change a set of letters in a passport. He publicly renounced the surname his ancestors bore, because that surname belonged to the white slave owner who owned them like cattle. He challenged not the Athletic Commission, but the entire history of America, declaring, "You do not own me. My past is not your property, and my future is not your business." The room exploded. It wasn't just noise. It was a howl of rage mixed with panic, because men in expensive suits realized their golden boy had just died before their eyes, and in his place, someone alien, incomprehensible, and deadly dangerous was born. Promoters in the back rows clutched their heads, seeing their millions burn. Newspaper editors were already drafting headlines about betrayal. But Muhammad Ali stood in the center of this hurricane absolutely unperturbed, like a rock against which waves crash, and in his eyes one could read the strange, frightening relief of a man who had just thrown the weight of 400 years of slavery off his shoulders. But there was one more question hanging in the air, a question no one dared to voice aloud, because the answer could be scarier than anything already spoken. If he is willing to destroy his name, his reputation, and his career for this new truth, then what else is he willing to do? No one in that room, including Ali himself, even suspected that this statement was only the first step onto the scaffold, and that the real price for the freedom to be himself would be billed not today, but 3 years later, when men in uniform would knock on his door to demand something more than just a name change. They would demand his life. And in that moment, when the camera flashes blinded him again, turning his face into a black and white mask, he smiled, but it was not the smile of a champion, but of a martyr who already sees his cross. The moment Muhammad Ali left that press conference, America didn't just turn away from him. It declared total war of annihilation on him, and the scale of this vendetta was such that today it is almost impossible to believe. You probably think the punishment was angry newspaper articles or booing from the stands, but the system works differently. It doesn't hit your emotions, it hits your wallet and your future. Over the next few weeks and months, the machine of the establishment methodically, like a hydraulic press, began to grind the life of a 22-year-old guy. He was stripped of the heavyweight title, not in the ring, where no one could touch him, but in the smoke-filled boardroom of a board of directors, where old white men who had never put on gloves sat. They revoked his boxing license in every state. They confiscated his passport, making him a prisoner in his own country. Imagine this level of pressure. They take away the only thing you are a genius at, in the very prime of your physical strength, in those golden years when an athlete must earn millions to provide for a lifetime. They didn't just want to punish him, they wanted him to starve. They wanted to see the proud Muhammad Ali crawl to them on his knees, broken and destitute, begging for the name Cassius, back in exchange for the ability to buy food. It was a public flogging, a signal to every black American. Look what happens to those who forget their place. Most people in his shoes would have broken within a month. They would have publicly repented, switched religions back, done anything to stop the nightmare. But here occurs the very plot twist that makes your brain explode with realization. They thought they were taking everything from him, but in reality, they took nothing that held value for him. And here, we return to that very dagger we planted in the first act, the Olympic gold medal. Do you remember it? That piece of metal he slept with, which he considered his pass into the world of humans? Legend has it, and this is the moment where all threads converge to a single point, triggering an intellectual catharsis, that shortly after that humiliation in the diner, long before the name change, Cassius Clay took a walk that defined his fate. He went to the Jefferson Bridge over the Ohio River. It was night. The water below was black and thick as oil. He took out the medal, its ribbon already frayed from constant wear. He looked at this golden disc, engraved with the Olympic rings and the fake promises of the American dream, and he didn't just hide it in a drawer. He opened his fingers. Do you hear that splash? That quiet sound of metal hitting water in the night silence. The second the metal disappeared into the murky waters of the Ohio, Cassius Clay died. His death didn't happen at the press conference in Miami, nor in the Nation of Islam office. It happened there, on the bridge, in total solitude. The name change was merely the official death certificate of that naive boy who believed love could be bought with gold, and that is why, when they took his titles and millions, he didn't break. How can you frighten a man with poverty who voluntarily threw his most expensive treasure into the river? How can you humiliate someone who already gave up the world's main prize to save his soul? The system made a fatal error. Trying to bury him, they didn't realize he was a seed. By taking away boxing, they inadvertently gave him something greater, a voice. Deprived of the ability to fight in the ring, he went to universities, to campuses, to TV shows. He started speaking, and his words hit harder than his jabs. If he had remained good Cassius, he would have just been a great athlete whose photo hung in barbershops. But by becoming Muhammad Ali, an outcast and a martyr, he turned into a symbol of resistance for every oppressed person on the planet. They wanted to erase him from history, but instead, they single-handedly carved his name into eternity, turning a sports drama into a myth about a man who lost everything earthly to gain immortality. And that medal, rusting at the bottom of the Ohio River, became not a symbol of loss, but the price of admission into history, which he paid in advance without flinching for a second. Today we look at black and white photos of Muhammad Ali, and they seem as safe and monumental as portraits of Abraham Lincoln or Martin Luther King. But this historical distance is the most dangerous optical illusion, hiding the true scale of his victory from us. To truly understand the finale of this drama, we need to fast forward 32 years from that fateful morning in Miami to a hot summer evening in 1996 in Atlanta, where an event occurred at the opening of the Olympic Games that made 3 billion people watching on TV hold their breath. In the center of a giant stadium stood an old man. His body, once a perfect weapon, now treacherously trembled from Parkinson's disease. His face, once the most mobile and talkative in the world, was frozen in a motionless mask. But in his eyes burned the same fire we saw in 1964. He was entrusted to light the Olympic flame, the highest honor a country can bestow upon its hero. But the irony of this moment was so sharp it cut the heart. America, which 30 years ago took his passport, deprived him of work, and threatened him with prison for his beliefs, was now asking him to be its face, its symbol, its soul. You think this was a happy ending? You think the system simply forgave him? No. Here the effect of inverted reality kicks in. America didn't forgive Ali. Ali forgave America. The moment he raised the torch to the cauldron with a shaking hand, the circle closed, and we returned to that very dagger, the gold medal resting on the silty bottom of the Ohio River. Remember how he threw it away because it was a symbol of fake recognition? In Atlanta, during a break in a basketball game, the president of the International Olympic Committee approached Ali and did what seemed impossible. He handed him a duplicate of that lost 1960 medal. The crowd roared, people wept, seeing this as an act of ultimate justice, the return of a lost treasure. But if you look closely at Ali's face in that moment, you see not gratitude, but a calm, almost condescending understanding. The viewer experiences catharsis in that moment, thinking, finally they returned what he lost. But the truth flips everything upside down. He didn't need that medal. The gold they returned to him no longer held power over him, because he had proved that a man's greatness is measured not by medal hanging around his neck, nor by a name written in a passport, but by the ability to force the world to accept you on your own, uncompromising terms. The 1996 medal was not a reward for Ali. It was the capitulation of a system that admitted it couldn't break him. They tried to destroy Cassius Clay, but instead they tempered Muhammad Ali, turning him from a simple athlete into a global icon of conscience. He didn't win when he knocked out Foreman in Zaire, nor when he lit the fire in Atlanta. He won that morning in Miami when he risked becoming the most hated man in the country to preserve his right to be himself. And now, as we stand on the ruins of this colossal battle of one man against an entire empire, I want to ask you a question that might seem uncomfortable, but is necessary so that this story doesn't remain just a beautiful tale. Today it is easy to love Ali. His face is printed on t-shirts, his quotes are posted on social media. He is called the greatest, even by those who have never seen boxing. But ask yourself honestly, hand on heart, if you lived in 1964, if you read those newspapers, if you saw your national hero joining an organization everyone called terrorist and spitting on your shrines, whose side would you have been on then? Would you have been among the few who saw it as an act of freedom? Or would you have been among the 80% of Americans who screamed traitor and wished for his defeat? It is easy to revere heroes when they have already become bronze statues and can no longer frighten us. But are we ready to accept a new Ali today if he appears and once again challenges our deepest beliefs? Was Cassius Clay a fanatic who betrayed his country for a sect? Or was he the only free man in a land of slaves who showed us that a name is not just a word, but a declaration of independence? Write in the comments, who was he to you in that moment? A madman who destroyed his life, or a prophet who saw the future? I will be waiting for your answers, because it is in them that the difference between remembering history and understanding it lies.